I want to make a quick little video. It's been a couple days since I made a video. A subscriber was basically asked to build this little application as an interview homework assignment. Okay, so he's given 24 hours to build this little application, which I'll show you in a second. If I could clear my cookies 1 second. Go here and let's delete my session stuff and refresh the page. So basically, they were asked to build an application where you can go and upload a file to S3, and then you can view all the files that you uploaded, and you can also download those files using your web app, right? And he was given 24 hours to implement all this, and he asked me like if I wanted to help him out, and so I started building it just to see how hard it was, and it took me like 2 hours maybe to fully do this. The hardest part was setting up Passport to do the authentication because I haven't really done it in a long time. It's kind of confusing, honestly. But this is the app. You can log in. It takes you to Google. You can go ahead and log in with like your email account. And then you have the ability to upload a new file, or you can download an existing file. So let me just go ahead and click Choose File. And let's see if I happen to have any files anywhere. Let's just take a screenshot, and I'll upload that screenshot when it gets saved to my desktop. Probably be the easiest way to do this. So go to my desktop, click that screenshot, click upload, and it fails. Post to files, empty response. Don't know why that failed. Let's just go over to the server and see what's going on. Oh, I forgot to start my local S3 server, npm run S3. All right, let's try it again. I'm going to go ahead and click upload. Why is this crap not working? Everything is broken. I gotta restart my app. Okay. Moment of truth, let's try it again. Yeah, so I'm an idiot. I did some refactoring and I didn't really test it before this video, so I apologize. I'll probably just cut this crap out. Let's see, upload model. I'm using Mongoose for like uploading this stuff. I don't know how I screwed up the refactoring so bad. Here we go. So you can upload a file, and that's actually persisting the file to a local running S3 service that's running on port 9000, I think. Actually, I don't know what port's running on. I guess it's running on 4568 for some reason. But they were specifically asked to make sure the files were uploaded to S3. And honestly, to sign up for Amazon, you have to basically provide a credit card, which most people like. You shouldn't have to do for an interview. This whole interview question is stupid, by the way. So if you're watching this, being like, "Oh man, I need to build this in 24 hours," no, you should just refuse to do that and go find a different company because that's just a load of crap to have to build this. But notice here, you can click on the file and it downloads. By the way, I got my StarCraft 2 back there. So that's about it. I mean, and behind the scenes, all this data is persisted using MongoDB, and I have a MongoDB Atlas instance set up. And all of this authentication is done using Passport, and the front end is using React and Vite. So I figured I'd just kind of walk you through what I did, and I'll give you a link to this code if you ever want to see like how you can build something simple where you can upload files to S3 and then also use Passport for some type of authentication. I don't know why I use JavaScript for this project. I usually use TypeScript, but for some stupid reason, I decided to use JavaScript because I thought it'd be faster. And of course, you just keep running the bugs because TypeScript just is much better. Yeah, so where do you all want to start? Let's start at the front end. Pretty straightforward. It's a Vite app with React. We got a source folder, and I basically put everything into a single file. Honestly, if this was for a real interview, you probably want to show them that you can split stuff up into smaller components, but this is such a simple application that like I didn't feel like it was even needed. You could use custom hooks to abstract away some of the stuff, but honestly, 24 hours is kind of a crazy requirement to solve all this, especially for a junior full stack position. But all of the UI, basically what it does is if you're not logged in, which the way I figure out if you're logged in or not, I basically, when the app loads, I try to fetch your files. And then if you get a response back, a success status code of 200, then we just set the files on state, and then we set is authenticated to true. So if for whatever reason you try to fetch your files and it crashes, obviously you're not authenticated. Kind of hacky, but it gets the job done. And then if you're not authenticated, I just show a login link. And if you are, I show a form that has a file, it has an input, and it has a button. And I also nested all my uploads inside the form, which is kind of stupid. I don't know why I did that. Let's just go ahead and refactor this while I'm recording so I don't forget about it. All right, so it's a form that has like, this stuff here, pretty straightforward. And when you select the file, I set some state. You keep track of what file you selected. So up here we have a function called oh, can't speak. Up here we have a function called handle file select that takes in the file that you selected and saves it in state. And then when you submit the form at a later point, handle submit over here, that calls a function called upload file. It takes in a file, does the backend API post request, and then it will kind of append the file that's returned from the API onto that uploads list. That's why this thing got appended when I uploaded it. And then I think also I clear out the file after I upload to kind of reset it. Actually, I don't know if I even clear the file. That might be a bug as well. Like after you upload, it just sits around, right? So this the garbage app that I wrote that has a bug. So let's just set file to undefined, and that should clear it out, I hope. Okay, that didn't work for some reason, and the backend crashed. So let's restart the backend and re-log in. Why did that not reset it? That's file undefined. That should have cleared it out, right? But for some reason it didn't. I don't, maybe you have to come back and add some type of uncontrolled like value here. Yeah, this probably needs like a value, a file or something stupid like that. I don't know, there's a special way you have to do it with files. So like I'd have to come back and refresh my memory. Okay, yeah, this is just totally messed up. At this point, I don't even know how to be a web developer. I don't know what I'm doing, so. But anyway, so we got the form that basically takes in a file. It's kind of buggy. You need to reset it. I'd have to go Google how to do that. Luckily, it's a take-home assignment, so you can use Stack Overflow. You can Google for some solutions. So like, it's not that hard to like add in some additional functionality. You can find the answers online. And then we loop over and render out all the uploaded files. And when you click on them, here's the cool part. It redirects your page to a /files/upload.file name. So if you hover over these, you'll see that it takes you down to files/voice.png. If I command click this, it'll download the file. So that's about it for the front end. Nothing too straightforward. Hopefully I didn't slaughter that explanation for you all. I guess we could look at the upload file method. It basically does a fetch post request to the backend with a multi-part form data upload. That's how you attach the file, and that'll do a multi-part upload. So if we actually look at this in the network request, let's select the file and do this again. And if I click on this, you'll see that it does a post request here, and I believe it is a multi-part upload. Let's go and find that content type right here, multi-part form data, and this has the file attached to it over here somewhere, I guess in the payload or something. So that's about it. Now let's look at the backend real quick for anyone who's interested in learning more about the backend and like how that works. The hardest part for me, this entire thing, was relearning how to use Passport.js, because I used it a long time ago just playing around, but like if you go and read the docs, there's a lot of information. It's kind of confusing. So the backend is using Express.js, and if you look at this index file, there's a lot of garbage you have to like import to get this all working. And I think most of this stuff I just found online and just kind of copied stuff in to get it working. But basically, I had to use Multer so that you can do the multi-part upload and take in the file. And we'll see that in a second down below where I kind of register my routes. Cookie parser and cookie session, like you need these to have your Express app parse the cookie and set up your Passport session. And then I import Passport, and then I also set up a Google strategy because specifically the take-home assignment was asked to set up with Google Authentication. So again, you can read through the Passport docs. They kind of show you how to do all this, and there's a bunch of example projects out there that do this. And then you kind of say, okay, well, I want to tell Passport to allow us using this Google strategy. So you basically say use. I have a Google ID and secret in my .env file, which I'm kind of setting up over here. This is how you can load in a .env file. You load in this package, and then you call the config method. And then with Passport, you have to set up a serialized and deserialized user. Honestly, I tried reading through the docs. I didn't really care because this isn't a real assignment that I'm trying to figure out. But it's a way to basically, like, when the cookie comes in, when you deserialize it, I believe you can do stuff with it. And also when you're trying to serialize the cookie, again, don't quote me on any of this stuff. Go read the docs. But in this case, we're just saying do nothing with it. Just pass in the user. And I think I have access to this user at a later point in the middleware. 4s we had to set up just because, like, my Vite app is running on a different port. So I did allow my backend to only get access from the front end at 5173. And then I had to say credentials true. I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to do the credentials. It's always like a small configuration you waste time on, and then you finally figure it out, and you're like, wow, I just spent 30 minutes because I forgot to set this to true. Stuff like that. Again, use the cookie parser, use the cookie session, tell Passport to initialize and load the session stuff. Again, go read the docs. I don't know what the stuff is, but you have to use it. And then I'm basically making 2 endpoints. So these are like the endpoints that we're using when you click on the login button. When you click login, it takes you here. And then that will basically redirect you to Google and pass that Google information that we had set up over here, right? And also passes a callback URL. And once you've clicked on your email on that Google sign-in, it'll send you back to this page, or sorry, this route. And what this route does is basically take the information that was sent back from Google. Somehow it gets tied into this serialized user, deserialized user stuff, and that's stored on a cookie. And that's how basically the session is set up. And you remember at the start of this video, I cleared my cookie. I went over here, and if I delete session here and refresh, I'm now logged out. So like that session cookie is what's used to know if I'm logged in or not to the application. So that's kind of like the Passport.js setup for this application. Again, I'm just kind of breezing over this stuff, mainly because I don't even remember how I worked on this like a week ago, and I don't even remember like half the stuff I did to get it working. And then the 3 main endpoints that are kind of important to like talk about is like, how do you allow users to upload files? Well, you have a post request endpoint to /files. Verify that the user is authenticated. We can kind of look at this method real quick. Basically, I just check if the user is authenticated here. This is something that's built into Passport, right? So when you set up that Passport initialize and Passport configure, you get this method, and you can just call it, and that dives into the Passport code and knows if your session cookie is set or not. And if it is, you go next in the express middleware. Otherwise, you throw an error and return that. So that's how this function works. Pretty cool. And then if you are authenticated, we get that file that was uploaded. Remember, we did the post request. I don't know if I still have it anymore, but remember it did a post request and we had like a file in the payload. So that's basically taking that file name in the multi-part upload, and that gives you access to use it in the controller. So let's look at the controller real quick. Notice here it says rec.file. That's because this thing is corresponding to this file name, which corresponds to this file in the payload. So now you actually have like the raw file that you can do stuff with. So what I do is I create a mongoose model, and I set the file name equal to the original file names. That's how we're tracking like it displaying on the UI. Let me log in again real quick. All right, so that's how we track like what we actually want to display here in the UI. And then we save that. So we use the mongoose model instance, we do .save, we await on it. Now it's persisted to Mongo Atlas. And then finally, we upload the file to S3. So if you haven't used AWS SDK before, basically you can use s3.putObject, and that's how you save objects into various buckets, right? So in our case, we're abstracting away the bucket name. It probably would have made more sense to abstract this away as well. But honestly, this is for a little quick assignment. So like, why spend too much time like making this perfect and clean? And anyway, so we basically use the key of the original name. We store it in a bucket, and we store the buffer, right? So this will contain the actual, like all the bytes of the file that was uploaded, and it'll just store it into S3. And then we return that to the user. So that's why we can basically append the response quickly here when we click upload. So let's look at the other endpoints. There's 2 more endpoints. One is, how do you get all of the files that have been uploaded? Well, we have the /files endpoint. You do a GET request that calls get files controller. Let's look at this. Very straightforward. It uses a mongoose model. It gets everything that's stored in that collection, and then it returns it back to the front end. Let's look at this upload model because I didn't really show it. Again, I'm using Mongoose. You basically set up a Mongoose schema. You can define different properties on the schema. You can then set up the model using the schema and give it like a unique name. And then we're just basically setting up a common JS export here so that we can use it in other files. So hopefully you kind of understand how to use Mongoose already if you're kind of familiar with Mern. If not, go read about it. So here we have another endpoint for how do you get the download for the individual file. Well, we have a file/file name endpoint. If you look at this controller, this one's a little fun. We basically use that S3 library we call get object. And again, we're saying get the object from this bucket that has the key of file name. Again, I didn't really spend too much time looking into authentication. I didn't really spend too much time in like worrying about like, am I validating that this user should have access to this key, because we're not doing like multiple users uploading files. I'm trying to keep it as basic as possible just to show that I can build this out. And then we basically have to send that back in the response, right? So we attach that to the response. We change the content type, and then we also send back the binary here. So this will send back the file, and that's why we're able to download it when we click it. So that was my super fast overview of how the API is set up with Passport, how I'm able to persist stuff to a locally running S3. Now, I didn't talk about the locally running S3. Let's look at this real quick. So I have a script called S3, and when you run it, it makes a directory called S3, which is here. And it has all the files. Like when you upload those files, it just stores them right here in this My Files bucket, right? So this is the bucket, and these are the files that you're storing in based on the keys that you provided. And I'm using this S3 server service and saying host this S3 directory, and that basically mocks out and emulates a real S3 bucket that you'd probably use on Amazon, right? But again, I don't want to spend time setting up a Amazon login, setting up my credit card, doing all this other stuff. I mean, I do have an Amazon account already set up, but for him, like for an interviewer, like you shouldn't expect him to do all that stuff to get going. So that's how I get the locally running S3 thing. And then also when you run dev, it starts the server locally. Other than that, like, am I missing anything? Obviously, if this was a for a real assignment, like you'd probably go through here and make sure that your README looks really good and professional, but I don't care. So I'm trying to think also, is there anything else I would have done like to make this cleaner? Probably having magic numbers everywhere and like these hard-coded strings is probably something that they would like focus in on and be like, well, why'd you do it this way? Because you didn't pay me to build this thing. Yeah, so that's about it. I mean, I'll host this code anywhere, so if anyone gets asked to build this in 24 hours, they can just copy my code and just like submit it. I don't really care. But I do want to kind of like finish off with saying that like if you're asked to do something like this and you know how to do it and you've done it in the past, like let's say you've already worked with Express and you know how to work with Passport.js and you feel confident that you can knock this out in 24 hours, then yeah, sure, you could try doing it. But honestly, like that type of expectation to build this in 24 hours is kind of, what's the word? Kind of rude. Like for a potential employer to put that on you, like to put that much pressure on you to like get something implemented, especially like not even giving you like a week to do it. They give you 24 hours. Like that's kind of jacked up. So personally, I would just say don't even bother trying out for that company because the company's probably toxic to begin with. But if you really want to, I mean, you can do it. But regardless, this is a cool thing to kind of practice your knowledge with full stack development. Like, do you know how to build a really basic front end app that can connect to a back end and upload files? Do you know how to build out a really basic API that accepts files and can upload them somewhere and also persist some type of metadata to MongoDB or SQL or whatever database you want to use? This kind of encompasses the full stack gambit. So like if you can build this by yourself, I think it's a good sign that you're like progressing on your full stack journey. But again, like I would not expect, and if you are kind of applying for a full stack position, I mean, you probably have, hopefully you've built something similar in the past with authentication, with a database, with some type of file upload feature. Like most applications have all of these features. Most applications, you need the ability to upload like a profile image. How do you process that? How do you store that profile image? How do you give users the ability to retrieve that later on? So it's a good practice, and I definitely recommend you try this out if you're just looking for something to kind of code on. Other than that, I'll put a link in the description where this code is. And if you enjoyed watching, give me a thumbs up, comment, subscribe, press the bell icon, do what you need to do. Also, feel free to join my Discord if you want to talk to me directly or just ask questions to get help on your coding journey. We got people who are willing to help you out if you're stuck. And I'm trying to build a nice community of people who are willing to help you out. Anyway, yeah, have a good day. Happy coding.